Hello, welcome to Human Tech, a podcast about the intersection between humans and technology. My name is Guthrie. I am here with Susan.
Hey, Guthrie.
Hi.
You're kind of doing that announcer voice.
But
when you said between humans and technology.
Yeah, exactly. I was trying.
Have you been practicing?
Yes, every day. I stare in the mirror 10 times a day.
You do not. Hey, I have a beautiful day here in Wisconsin. It's very blue skies, sunny. Of course, it is like minus something outside. It's winter. Lots of snow. We've got like a foot of snow over the last couple of days.
It's cold here.
Yeah, and you're in Chicago, and it's cold.
Yes. The view out my window is very sunny.
Yeah.
Do you see what I did there?
Oh, yeah, I did. But did you have a view of anything, what objects can you see?
I don't.
The reason we're doing this, by the way, is because today's topic is objects and views. All right, I got to warn you. You and everybody else. This is when we teach workshops and stuff on UX and conceptual model design and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. This is the hardest thing we teach. I always tell people when we get to this part of whatever course we're teaching that, this is the toughest. And if we make it through, everything from here on out is clear sailing, as they say. So now we're going to give ourselves an extra challenge because we're going to do this without any visuals.
Yeah, I thought this would be hard.
Then why did you say we should do it?
We can do it shortly. It'll be great.
We can do it. Audio works. So, objects and views. So let's first put this in context. How's that?
Yep. Contextualize away.
All right. So I think we've talked before on one of our other episodes, but it's been a long time, and who knows whether anybody remembers it or even heard it. We talked about something called a conceptual model. And you and I talk about that because we talk about it's, you're designing a product, right? You're designing an app or you're designing software or something like that, a website. And this especially holds when you're designing like an app or software. And, you're going to do all the detailed design. You're going to design the screens and pages and decide what field, what data entry field should go here and what the label should be and where it should go and what colors you should use and all that stuff that we call, is commonly known as, detailed interaction design, right? Right. But then you've got like bigger or at least different design questions like information architecture, how should we categorize things?
Yes, categorization
and things like that, which go into what we call the conceptual model design. And so one of the things that I realized really early on in my user experience career, it has to do with this conceptual model design idea, but it's very specific. So what I noticed was that when software was hard to use, I'd be evaluating a client's piece of software. I'd be doing, a heuristic evaluation or a cognitive walkthrough. Hey, we should probably talk about those in one of these episodes, the difference between that. But anyway, we'd be evaluating it. And what I noticed was that people would get disoriented, users would get disoriented when they couldn't figure out what they were looking at, what objects they were supposed to take action on. That those two questions, what is it that I'm actually dealing with or interacting with or looking at, and what am I supposed to do with it? And like you're looking at a screen and it's like, is this the account profile, or is this an order, or what am I looking at, right?
Right.
That caused an enormous amount of confusion if people didn't understand what I came later to call the objects and the view of the objects and then the actions that they were supposed to take. So I thought we could talk about this somewhat esoteric topic because I think it's really important if you're designing, especially an app or software, you got to be really clear on what someone is viewing. So can I give you some examples?
Yes.
Okay. So if you go to use a calendar program, any of them, like it might be Microsoft Calendar, or maybe you're using one of the Office Calendar. Maybe you're using one of the web ones, like, what is it, Calendly or something like that, right?
Or even G Calendar,
any of those.
Probably not the real name of it, but I forget what the real name is.
When you're looking at that, there will be lots of cues and clues as to what you're looking at. And there will be, so, you went there to put an appointment on your calendar or to look up what meetings you have today. And so in that kind of situation, it's pretty clear what the object is. The object that you're looking at any given point, it's a calendar or your calendar. And then there's the view of the calendar, and that's pretty obvious in this situation too, because what are the different views, Guthrie, of a calendar?
Well, you have the daily, monthly, weekly.
Yeah, you have daily view, monthly, weekly. You might have annual. You have like a specific appointment view. And all of that is pretty easy to understand because calendars are fairly concrete.
Well, it helps that it's based off a real object, does it not? Right? It's that there's a calendar on the wall. We know what a calendar is supposed to be. It's only so many ways you can really demonstrate how time flows.
Right. And we have a pretty shared understanding of that, like, the week is divided up into days, right?
Yeah.
The month is divided up into weeks. The day is divided up into hours. I mean, this is all...
hours are divided up into seconds.
Into minutes. And, the shared understanding, the importance really with the shared understanding is not just that you and I share the understanding, but that we share the understanding with whoever the designer and the developer is of the program, right? So they thought it made sense to have the calendar go by month and by day and by week because they knew that that's what we thought. So that's an example of making object decisions, the object is the calendar, and making view decisions, the view is the month or the day or the weekly view, that in this conceptual model of this calendar software, that makes sense to the user. And, so it's like, well, big deal. Of course they're going to do it that way. Yeah, big deal. But now when we start to get into things where we don't have a shared view, where the users and the designers/developers don't share the same mindset, the same mental model, then when the designers and developers go to create that conceptual model, they create what they think makes sense, or they create what will make sense with the underlying programming code.
Right.
And that may not make sense to us at all. And so if you think about so I'm going to actually put you right on the spot, Guthrie, and I didn't give you any warning about this either, did I? I want you to think, can you think of a program, an application or software that you used, either recently or in the past, that you just found really confusing, at least initially when you were trying to learn it? Maybe you figured it out later, but initially you were like, what the heck is this?
The many
Okay,
programs.
Well, let's pick one and we'll reverse engineer it and see what they did with objects and views that made it difficult for you.
Well, this is tough because do you have to know? Because we're doing this on an auditory medium, so.
Yes, I know. So you can't show me. So you're just something that you're gonna have to. I'll interview you. I'll lead you through.
How well do I have to know the program?
You have to know
because there are programs I use that I never really figured out.
Okay, it can be one of those. There are programs you use that you never really figured out. It can be one of those. Just pick one. We'll talk about it. If it's not a good example, I'll have you pick another one.
Let's see. I can. There's a. I mean, I never like Ableton Live is ridiculous.
That's a good one. Yeah, I tried it once. You actually have used it. So let's talk about Ableton Live, which is a program for composing music, right?
Yes.
So when you're in Ableton Live and you're looking at a particular screen, okay, especially if you're looking at a screen where that's confusing, can you identify the object? What is it you're looking at? So, for instance, in the calendar program, we said the object was the calendar, and what do you think the object is in Ableton Live?
It's like, well, that's part of the problem,
right? Of course, and
right, so
yes.
there's two modes.
Oh yeah, modes. Oh my God, yeah, we can talk about modes.
And by two, I actually mean three.
Okay, what are the modes?
Well, again, how well do I really know it? I don't know if this fits that well. But there's the first mode is clip mode, where you organize your clips together into, and multiple clips come together to make I don't know what it's called, but it's all the clips in a line, and then you have multiple lines, each line being composed of multiple clips, and then there's the MIDI note view, which is underneath that, where it'll show you the notes of each clip in MIDI form. But then there's a different view that allows you to play different clip groupings together into and that's done chronologically over time.
Yeah.
Like a song.
And this is very this is the object and view problems. The more complex a piece of software is,
it's really complex.
The more likely there is to be object and view problems. But that doesn't mean they're not solvable. I mean, the more complex a piece of software is, the more important it becomes that you do a good job at having very clear objects and very clear views. So some of the problems with these complex software, especially, I see this a lot with software that has to do with sound or video is another example where they do this. Where they have a pane design, a P-A-N-E, although it often ends up being P-A-I-N, but P-A-N-E, where you have this pane over here is for this and this pane over here is for that. And what then the whole thing becomes just crazy. You've got objects nested in objects, or different objects and different views of different objects, and you don't even know what you have. So, for instance, when you were talking about the Ableton Live, you were talking about, you mentioned the word clip. So they've obviously picked an object called clip, and they've named it clip, right? No, they haven't.
I have no idea what it's called.
Okay.
I don't know. I'm calling it clip.
You don't know what it's called.
I don't know what it's called.
You could have called it clip because you didn't know what else to call it.
Yes, thank you.
So what happens, so here's what's going on with Ableton Live. And I haven't done a, official evaluation of Ableton Live, but I'm going to guess from what you've said that if I did an evaluation, I would find out that they were using, first of all, they're using objects and they're not naming them. So that means the user is looking at something and really doesn't have a clue what they're looking at. It's just, it's just a thing. And they don't know what it is, and they don't know what they can do with that, and they don't know how that relates to any other things that are also on the screen that are also not named. So when you have objects that you haven't named, that makes it confusing. And then the other thing that goes wrong is, are there multiple views of that thing, right? Remember, we had multiple views of the calendar. There was daily and weekly. And sometimes they have these, so we start with the problem of they have things and we don't know what the things are. And then they might have different views of the things. So maybe there's a zoomed in view of the clip and a zoomed out view. And maybe there's, all your clips together versus one individual clip. And, you might not realize that there are different views. Or if one is showing, you might not realize what view you're looking at. Mm-hmm. And then, to compound it further, you don't know what the actions are that you can take on this thing. So, when there's an object, you need to know what you can do with that object. So it might not be clear or obvious when you're looking at the screen what you can do with these things called clips. Like, can you start a new one? Can you close it? Can you merge them together? Like, what are you supposed to do? Do you play it? Like, what are you supposed to do with this thing you have called a clip? And then one more problem is oftentimes, and it sounds like it may be true in some parts of Ableton Live, they pick objects, whether they've named them or not, that make sense to them, but just don't make sense to people, at least not initially. And they don't provide any training to share with you their model of here are the objects.
Look, they may do all of this, but they just do a bad job of it. I don't want to disparage them.
Well, I've used Ableton Live, and I would disparage them. No, it's very common for complex software that doesn't do something simple rooted in the physical world, like you mentioned.
Yeah.
To not have done a great job of choosing and identifying objects and views. So it's just it's a really common issue, and probably the biggest cause of usability and user experience issues for any moderately to heavily complicated piece of software.
Yeah.
So when I'm going to evaluate, when someone says to me,
I should, in fairness to Ableton, there's now an Ableton 10, which I haven't used, and maybe it's better or different or something.
Yeah, and maybe it's not. So, and then in some programs, and I'm not saying Ableton does this, although I think they do. But for instance, I know we'll pick on a different company. Adobe Premiere does this, where there are actually multiple objects on the screen, each of which have multiple views, and each of which have multiple actions. And so now you've got the initial problem and you've got it compounded.
Right.
So would you like to talk about what to do about this if you're the designer / developer?
Sure.
Do you have any ideas? Any guesses?
Well, I think... Can I ask you a better question? Or a different question?
Yeah. I thought my question was good. What do you mean a better question?
Can you think of any... Can you think of any examples of a really, really complicated piece of software that's done well? Well, because yes, everyone knows Adobe Suite and Audition, and like the UI is complicated, and there's all these objects and all these views. But it's also a very, very, very complicated. It's doing a lot of stuff, and so I'm just trying to think of, are there other? Can you think of any software that does a lot of stuff in multiple ways but is better?
Well, all the products I've helped design. Ha 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 ha. Well, yeah, probably. I'm thinking about, products I use. So, I mean, it might not be as complicated.
I have a couple answers, by the way.
You want to go first?
Sure.
Go ahead.
So something that's really, really, really complicated, but also great,
is
a lot of video game interfaces. So if you think of a Dota or some other kind of real-time strategy games.
Uh-huh.
So Dota, for example, okay? Let me just give you an example of what's going on here. On one screen, all right, it shows you, you have the ability to, you have to like move around on screen. You have to target specific places.
Mm-hmm. And
then you can upgrade and cast spells on like the specific place. There's a place for items. Where you store items, you can buy items, and items have uses. You can trigger items uses at various times. There's communication with your teammates. There's a picture of the map with a mini map with all sorts of stuff. There's there's an overlay that shows the current status, the time, the day, the night, the current status of your teammates and the ultimates that they have. There's like, it shows you the health points and mana, and like there's a lot of stuff going on.
Okay, and you think they do a good job of it?
People use it.
And why do you think they do? Why is it that you think people that it's easy to use with all that stuff going
on? Because I have a couple thoughts. The first being is that you have to do everything really, really quickly. Within a second, you have to, we're talking, you teleport in, you cast a spell, you use an ability, or you use an item, you attack someone, you move out of the way, a different teammate comes in, they cast a spell, you run into the bush, you go back home, you buy an item, like you have to do all that within a couple of seconds.
Okay.
And so, if it was hard and complicated to use, the game would literally have no value because you couldn't execute what you wanted to. So the critical component of the game's success, or a critical component, is the ability to actually perform these complex maneuvers on a regular basis.
Is the ability to use the interface.
Yeah, exactly.
So, but what do you think they've done in design that makes that possible?
So what they do, and what a lot of video games do, is the first part is that they use the full screen, the full potential of the screen.
Mm-hmm.
So you have a big thing in the middle, but then on all sides, bottom, top, a little on the sides sometimes, there are like these, it's very, very airplane cockpit-ish.
Mm-hmm.
Where you have like the window, right? But then around it you have like a bunch of different gauges.
Mm-hmm.
So, if I mean you should it would be if you have a second, you should just go and take a look at like what Dota like a Dota screen looks like.
All right, how are you spelling that?
DOTA 2 and then just type in like screenshot.
People can maybe hear me typing here.
Well, that's fine.
Okay. Dota 2 screenshot. All right. All right.
So I mean, Dota 2 is one of the most complicated games really that you can play, and that's why I picked that example for those who were wondering.
So one of the things I'm going to say then, if we wanted to look at this from an object and view.
Now, are you looking? I don't exactly know what you're looking at, but I'm assuming it's got like the bottom has all kinds of stuff on it, and there's a bar on the top.
Yes.
And stuff going on the screen.
Yep.
Okay.
So one of the things is, maybe not everywhere, but there are object names around here.
Do you see the shop button on the left, bottom left?
Shop. Not in this screenshot.
Okay, then I don't know.
But we've got, inventory. I see the word. I'm looking at words. I see the word inventory.
No, you're looking at the wrong spot then.
Oh, all right. Anyway, I'm going to guess that they've done a relatively good job of identifying important objects. And that at any given moment on the screen, you know what the objects are, and you know what they mean, and you know where to go to do something with that object. Would you say that's accurate?
Yeah, I mean, there's a huge learning curve, but
yes,
everything is very clearly labeled. The items or abilities are like a picture that's easily associated with them. Mm-hmm. So like, man, I wish I could share this with you. Hold on. Here, give me just a second. I can share this one page. So if you just open up. Okay. So now we're looking at the same picture, and the audience can't see this, but that's fine. It doesn't particularly matter. Okay. So you got that open.
Mm-hmm.
So you see that so just starting on the left, right? There's a mini map.
Mm-hmm.
And just looking at it, and you don't need to know anything about the game, and you don't. But you can clearly kind of tell, right? Like there are two sides, and there are various icons on there. Mm-hmm. In the middle, there's the spells, and each one has a particular symbol.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have the little icons to the right of that, and that's the items. Mm-hmm. And each one looks very distinct from the other.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing in particular, okay? So if you look on the far right side, do you see this? Do you see the there's a little flying icon,
mm-hmm.
right? So that's a very small icon, but it does a very specific thing, which is about the courier. So there's this complex action where there's where you can buy items and put them on a courier that actually carries them around the map in various ways.
Mm-hmm.
And so you need to be able to call that. But so instead of burying that in some sort of menu, which would require multiple clicks, there's a very small dedicated button for it on your display. It's almost like it's almost like a HUD, a heads up display.
Right.
In that case.
If we again looking at this in terms of objects and views,
mm-hmm.
Whether it's with words or good icon design, right?
Yeah.
Because
mm-hmm.
it could be either way. It's relatively clear, and it's relative, like you said. There's a learning curve, but it will be relatively easy for you to learn what the objects are, what they do, what you can do with them, and what view. Like, am I looking at the detailed or am I looking at the zoomed out map, right? Mm-hmm. So that is helping this to be easier to learn and use than it could have been if they hadn't made that clear, if they didn't have good distinctions between objects, or if they picked, objects that didn't make sense to you. And I think that what you said before is interesting, because in this case, this is a game. If they make it too hard to learn or use, you won't play the game. With games, there's always a. This actually gets into a different topic that I hope we do one of these days, which is about human factor loads. I mean, if a game is too easy, it won't be interesting. So this was an interesting example to use because it's a game. So there, it can't be too easy. But on the other hand, if it's too hard for you to even decipher what's going on, you're not going to use it. And so the game, whoever created this game, is very interested in evaluating and crafting the right level of engagement for the people playing it. Not too hard, not too easy, and so on. And if you think about some of the complex software you've used that was not a game, you sometimes have to wonder if the people designing it are aware of how hard they've made it and how much they care, right? How important is it to their revenue, their bottom line, or anything else if it's hard to use, or if it has some of these conceptual model problems.
Yeah, I just find it's interesting that it seems to be when the software is really complex, the best UIs seem to happen in situations when you have to make like split-second decisions.
Well, that's probably because
it's like by necessity, right?
Right, they have to. Because if they've got a poor design and in any way, whether it's detailed, micro design, or whether it's a macro design issue like we're talking about here, if they have a poor design, then if you have to make split-second decisions, it's just not going to be usable at all, and you're not even going to try, and you're going to give up, and you're not even going to learn how to use it, and they're not going to make any money. So, but if you've got a program like, tax accounting software, right, or discovery software for lawyers, or I'm just thinking about all the software I've evaluated and helped design. A decision management software. People aren't making split-second decisions, so your poor design decisions can kind of get buried in terms of how important they are. This idea, I'm trying. You asked me if I had an example, right, of a good one or a bad one. Well, I'm thinking of like my example might not be as exciting as a game, but I'm thinking like there's a certain program we use for creating and distributing our online course videos, and that's. And it's fairly complicated. I mean, you've got a lot of stuff going on, and tracking students and courses and creating lessons and uploading videos, and you've got files and assets and all kinds of stuff, right? But it's fairly, the object you're in, the view you're in is pretty good. They do a pretty good job of making the objects and the views clear. So that's an example, I would say, of something that's fairly complicated and not too hard to use or not too hard to learn. So if you want to get this right, I guess, first of all, I have some hints or ideas about how people, let's say that, people listening are working on a particular project for designing software. Here's what you can do. I mean, take a look at your, a particular task that someone is doing with your product, and look at that screen and identify what are the objects and what are the views of the objects, and are they clear, are they separate from each other? I'm looking right now, we'll bring up another example, pick on somebody else. I just opened LinkedIn right now, and a lot of people know LinkedIn. And, I know LinkedIn pretty well now, so I know kind of how to work my way around, although every now and then I get confused about what I'm looking at or what to do. But for instance, they have, I'm on a page, I actually I'm on the notification. So they have notifications, and then they have messaging, and then they have my network, they have jobs, and those are all objects, right? Although messaging and notification, if you didn't know LinkedIn, those objects kind of sound like similar, right?
Yeah.
And they're not, but they kind of sound similar. And then they have an object called me, which is, of course, my favorite object. But that was a joke. And then they have an object called work. Like, what is that? Like, what's work? And I don't know, actually. I'm going to click on it and see. And I don't know what work is, even after I clicked on it and looked at it. I'm not sure what it is. So, some of their choices of the words for what these things are okay, and others are like, eh. So that would be what I would suggest, is to go to a particular screen or page in your application that you're working on or your prototype, and look at the words and look at the icons and ask yourself, would people know what this thing is that they're looking at? I mean, when I'm looking at this whole page that's on notifications, do I know what I'm looking at? Well, notifications is pretty clear. It's like other things people have posted. That's what they mean by notifications. And if I say, well, what view am I in? Well, I'm in as I'm looking at this, it says recent at the top, and then there's a whole little thumbnail. So I would say I'm in the thumbnail view of recent notifications. That's what I'm looking at. And that's fairly clear. And I would assume that since it says recent and I have little thumbnails, there's probably other views. And indeed, if I click on one, I get a detailed view of a particular notification, right? Right. So, that's, you want to look and see, is it clear to people what they're looking at? Is the name of that thing, the way you've named it, does that make sense? Is it clear whether there's more than one view? Is it clear what the different views are? And is it clear what action I should take on this object? And if the answer to any of that is, maybe not, then there are lots of things you can do. First of all, of course, you should probably be doing user testing to find out if people understand what these things are. But then the other thing I want to talk about, Guthrie, is let's say you're doing an application from scratch, right? Like it doesn't exist. How do you make sure that you're going to pick objects and views that make sense? So there's actually, in the classes that we teach, there's a way to go about doing it. And basically what you have to do, what you really should do first is have a task flow of how people are going to do the most important tasks that you want them to do. And then from that description, and because you've done user research and you know what they're thinking about, you choose the major objects. And I always say you should have 1 or 2 or no more than 3 major user objects for every task someone is going to do. And you actually go through and you look at the tasks and you think about what you know about the users and you say, okay, I'm going to say that the major objects we should be showing them while they're doing this thing are, and then you list what those are and you describe them. You know, you say, I think that we should have a notifications object, and I think the view of that should be a list of thumbnails and a detailed view and a recent view versus all view. And you make those decisions before you've designed any screens.
Well, I think it's really important. I mean, having objects, you know, that are just markers that people can easily do stuff with.
Yeah.
I just think it makes it so much easier.
I mean, it makes sense, but then you know, I don't often during design, it's not a step that people stop and do. You know, they may realize after the fact when they're having user experience problems, maybe they'll realize that. I find a lot of people don't if they're not used to thinking this way. But the key is, can you make these decisions consciously, purposefully during design?
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
So, I mean, this obviously makes a lot of sense if you're doing, if you're designing software where something has to happen. I know that doesn't sound great, but that's a terrible.
Is there software where nothing has to happen?
Well, so for example, a website, right? Don't think about like a like where you're going to pay a bill and there's tasks that you need to do. Just think of like an informational website, you know?
Yes.
I'm displaying information. Maybe there's a login page, you know, but you know, it's not, I mean,
people aren't buying anything, they're not doing anything, they're just looking at the information.
Yeah. Or even buying, you know, it's just like, I don't know. Or something very simple.
Yeah, no, then this is not that important.
Okay. That was my question.
This is mainly for when you have you're designing a product in which people are trying to do tasks. There are various tasks that they're trying to do. I mean, you know, even if it's playing the game, right? If all you have is an informational website, then probably the most important, if we're talking about conceptual model design, which is what we're talking about, if you have an informational website, then the most important thing you should be doing is worrying about your information architecture, which is, I mean, it's not, there's of course some relationship between objects and views and information architecture, but they're not the same thing. But if you have, so if the only task people have is go find information on this, then you have an information architecture challenge. You don't have an object view challenge. If people have to know what they're looking at and know what view they're looking at it in and know what to do with it, then you have an object view challenge.
Okay.
So
that's useful.
Yeah. So I find this is I used to call this the secret to intuitive design. That's how strongly I kind of feel about it. I really do think it is. I think it's, if I had to guess what percentage of designers, people who design software applications, mobile or desktop or whatever, what percentage of them get to the point in their design process where they actually say, okay, now let's decide on objects and views.
Yeah.
I think it's a really small percentage, which makes me sad. And I've taught this quite a lot, and so I'm hoping that my students would do it. But it really, it goes against the way most people design. It requires that you do some thinking and decision making and testing before you start designing pages and screens. And a lot of people just want to jump right to designing pages and screens,
So it very much this is advanced level stuff.
It is, and because the other thing that we haven't necessarily talked about, and we don't have to today, but I guess I'll just hint at it. The other thing is that once you've got these objects and views mapped out, you know what they are for for a particular task. You know what the objects and views are. You can translate that into a screen/page flow easily. You can say, well, the first thing they need to do is this, so that means they should be looking at this object and this view of the object. And you just, that's step number one. And then they need to do this, which means they need to look at this object and this view of that object. And you map this out. We do this in our classes, and you end up with this beautiful map of what the screens are that you need to design and what needs to be on them. And then, of course, you still have to design them, right? I mean, you have to design the recent notification, the recent view of the notification object. I mean, you have to design that and decide what it's going to look like and how much you're going to show, and what borders and what colors and what information you're going to have on there. I mean, that you still have to do that design, but you know that at this point in the process, this is what they should be looking at, and it makes design. It does so many things, because if you're working from your task analysis that you did during your user research, because you did that. Then a couple things happen. You're now assured that your design is going to be easy to use. It's going to be intuitive. It's going to match the user's mental model. It's going to match their workflow. It's like 3/4 of the battle is taken care of. I'm not kidding. But it's interesting to me that people resist this.
Well, it's complicated and it's hard. I'm not surprised.
Yeah, and writing code is not complicated and hard. I mean, people do that. Right?
Yeah, but I guess that's like.
I mean, what? Yeah, I mean, it's complicated and hard. Really, you know what? It's not that. In a scale of, staring into space as 0 and figuring out how to send people to Mars as 100, all right? This is not up at 100, all right? It's not 0. I'll give you that. It's not even 50. It's not like brain surgery, I mean, it's like down around 25 or 30. It's not that hard. I think people resist. I don't know what people resist. I don't know why people resist this. Sometimes I think it's because they think it's not creative. I don't know. We probably do tend, without maybe knowing that we do, we probably tend to take a system one thinking approach to designing complex software, Mm-hmm. And we just want to, somehow we got in our mind how it should work, or how one part should work, and then we get lost in the maze of how to do things. And I also think once you make one or two decisions about designing complicated software, you just decide, you're going to have X, Y, or Z. Then I think if you're not willing to change that initial idea, you can get stuck, and you don't, objects and views forces you to stop and look at the big picture. And maybe people just don't like doing that. I don't know. I do know that when here's what I found. If I'm teaching someone who is used to doing design, they want to get sketching screens like right away.
Yeah.
So they don't like pausing to do this part. But and then I've also found if I'm teaching like people who have a programming or development background, you know what they get frustrated at with this? There's not one right answer.
Right.
And they don't like that. Because, you and I could take the same situation, the same task that people need to do, the same target audience, okay? And I could decide that my objects are going to be this, this, and this, and my views are going to be this, this, and this. You could decide differently. You could decide your objects were going to be this, 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 and the views were going to be this, this, this. And we would design two different interfaces for the same audience doing the same task. And that's okay. And people struggle with that. Like they think there's one right interface. There's not one right interface. There's like multiple universes.
Right.
Now, some of the interfaces are better than others. Some are more intuitive, some are easier to learn, and so on. But there's a lot of different ways to do it. It just depends on which objects and views you've picked. So I would rather you pick those consciously.
Man.
What?
It's tough.
Why is it tough? See?
It's just
to me, it's not tough. Why is it tough?
It's just abstract. It's just abstract.
That's what it is. It's abstract. Why does that? But come on, is that really hard?
I guess so. Well, we'll see. We'll see if this gets very popular. My guess is that people are like, "Oh, I don't know. This is too hard."
They haven't even made it to this point in the episode, have they?
No.
Oh, come on!
No one's
now
listening
you're
to this
making me
anymore.
really sad. Nobody's listening.
It's okay. Hopefully, you gain some street cred with
I gained some street cred
with people who really are knowledgeable about the situation.
Yeah. It's hard to know that something works and nobody wants to do it because it's not fun. We have to figure out a fun way to do this. That's what we have to do.
No. We'll just more bad design. It's more work for us. It's great.
Oh, you want people to make bad object view decisions so that we have to come in and help them. All right, I can buy that. Guthrie, if people want to learn more about, actually I want to tell them if they want to learn more about conceptual model design, we have a course on this.
Oh.
We have an online video course. We also have an in-person course that we're teaching in a couple of weeks on this very topic. So if you want to learn more, let us know. We'll help you learn more about it. And if people want to get a hold of us, Guthrie, they should email
info@theteamw.com.
Or they can go to our website,
theteamw.com,
and they get more information, right?
Yes.
Hey, Guthrie, it was good to talk to you. Stay warm in Chicago.
Yes, stay warm in Wisconsin. And this was fun. I will talk to you soon.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.